Welcome back to the archives. What you are about to hear is classified under Operation Chalice, a domestic intercept program initiated by a non-governmental entity operating within the parameters of the Department of Defense. This file was supposed to be scrubbed from every database on Earth. If the source material ever leaked, the witness, a man named Elias Thorne, would be disappeared to a black site faster than you can say false flag. Pay attention to the dates. This is happening now. 2025. The file begins with an audio transcript from Elias, a disillusioned former scout living as a volunteer ranger near the Arizona border. Date, April 17, 2025. Elias, 3 years I've been out here, and the silence has never been broken. Not like this. My sensors picked up a massive thermal spike, localized, impossible. Too hot for wildfire, too structured for natural lightning. It was like something punched a clean hole in the atmosphere. Narrator meta-commentary, note the precision of the thermal signature. Leaked data from the 2014 documents mentioned, structured atmospheric entry, they don't crash, they glide into a predetermined trajectory, but something went wrong here. Elias immediately went to the coordinates, driving his decommissioned Humvee through restricted fire trails. Elias, I found the crater around 0300 hours. It wasn't deep, maybe 12 feet, but the earth was fused to obsidian, scorched black glass. There was no wreckage, no metal, nothing that looked like a plane or rocket. Just this smell, ozone and something else, like burning lilies. He followed a trail leading away from the impact site. The trail wasn't footsteps, it was a smear, a dragging mark, leading toward a collapsed rock shelter deep in a canyon system. He armed his rifle, adrenaline masking the growing horror. He knew, instinctively, this wasn't human wreckage. Elias, she was inside the shelter. Lying on the cold stone. At first, I thought she was just a civilian hiker, maybe a model. She was flawless. Utterly flawless. The symmetry of her face, the way her hair, which looked like spun copper wire, lay around her head. But then I saw the wound. Narrator meta-commentary, pay attention here, folks. Elias's description of flawless symmetry is consistent across dozens of high-level witness testimonies we've found dating back to Roswell. They are biologically humanoid, but optimized. The human form, perfected past the limits of our natural evolution. This is not a drone. This is a living entity. Elias approached slowly. He noticed the material of her suit. It wasn't fabric, it looked organic, like dried, smooth tendon, tightly embracing her form. It was torn near her abdomen. She was breathing, shallow and rapid. She was alive, biological, and bleeding that impossibly deep purple color. She opened her eyes. They weren't black or gray, they were liquid gold, and they looked at him with an intensity that pierced through his military conditioning. He dropped his rifle. He wasn't scared of the entity, he was terrified by the profound realization that everything he knew about the universe was wrong. Elias decided. He couldn't leave her. Not because she was beautiful, but because she was wounded, suffering. He spent the next hour stabilizing her, using his old field medic training. He carefully bandaged the wound, noting that the skin, while porcelain-like, felt warm and resilient, like highly polished quartz. For 2 days, he hid her in his secluded cabin, miles from any official road. He learned her name, or the closest phonetic approximation, Lyra. She communicated without words, a subtle pressure inside his skull, projecting images, concepts. She was running, escaping a larger conflict. A very human conflict, surprisingly. Elias, she told me telepathically that the human concept of faith was a profound waste of potential. She saw our religions, not as guiding light, but as self-imposed shackles. It challenged everything I used to believe in the core, everything my old chaplain told me. If God exists, Lyra said, he is merely another biological entity further up the chain. Narrator meta-commentary, this is critical. The religious challenge is a recurring theme in abduction files where the aliens are communicative. They are not spiritual entities, they are highly advanced biologists. They treat faith as a neurological artifact. Lyra was biologically grounded, but capable of phenomena we label as miraculous. On the third night, Lyra was stronger. She moved her hand and touched Elias's forehead. He described the sensation as being simultaneously frozen and accelerated. This was the start of the interaction tied to the 3I Atlas starship. She needed to contact her source. Elias, I wasn't in the cabin anymore. I was nowhere. I was only consciousness. Astral projection, she called it. We were traveling vast distances instantly. I saw her ship. The 3I Atlas. It wasn't metal. It was gigantic, rotating, and looked like a colossal, living structure, a spindle made of bone and light, pulsing with bioluminescence. Inside the perceived space of the Atlas, he saw others. Biological humanoids, just like Lyra, but specialized, some impossibly tall, some broader, all moving with silent purpose. They were not machines, they were an evolved, communal biology. Lyra showed him the conflict they were escaping, an internal schism within their own species. The message was clear, they were monitoring Earth because our primitive aggressive tendencies mirrored the nascent conflict that nearly destroyed their civilization millennia ago. Lyra was a scout, trying to prevent an unnecessary collision with our developing nuclear capacity. When they returned, the touch was broken. Elias collapsed, sweating, hyperventilating. He looked at Lyra. She was almost completely healed. The purple wound had closed, leaving only a faint, silvery line, a scar of perfect tissue regeneration. This confirmed the speed and efficiency of their biological systems. Before she left, she gave him a gift. A small, smooth stone, obsidian black, cold to the touch. It had no apparent features, no buttons or lights. She said, "This is a key. It does not open doors, but buys time. Do not use it unless the veil between worlds is threatened by your aggressors." Elias looked at his radio. It was dead. Then he heard it, the low, almost imperceptible rumble of heavy vehicles moving off-road, closing in fast. The military contractors had triangulated his location based on the initial thermal anomaly. This was the contingency. Lyra stood up, completely mobile now. Her posture was regal and powerful. "They come," she projected. "The human element that seeks to control, not comprehend. They seek my biology." She gave him one final, profound look that transcended fear or gratitude. It was clinical, yet deeply sad. The doors burst inward. 4 figures, tactical gear, no insignia, high-grade kinetic weapons. They were professionals. "Hands up, Thorn. Secure the asset." Elias, reacting on instinct, shouted, "She's wounded." But the extraction team didn't care. They were there for the specimen. Lyra didn't fight physically. She raised her hands slightly. Elias, seeing the paramilitary raise their weapons, grabbed the obsidian stone from his pocket. He didn't know what it did, but he trusted her. He squeezed it tightly. The world didn't explode. It slowed. The sounds distorted, stretching into agonizing moans. The paramilitary team froze mid-step, their expressions locked in confusion. The air shimmered around Lyra, a localized temporal distortion, a biological weapon that slows time only for the aggressors. Lyra turned to Elias, moving at normal speed in the slow-motion chaos. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The gift protects the observer. We have bought time for my extraction. Remember what you saw, Elias. The reality is vastly larger than your doctrine allows. She walked out the broken door and vanished into the pre-dawn wilderness. The temporal field snapped off instantly. The world rushed back to normal. The soldiers blinked, disoriented, their leader shouting, "Where is she?" They turned on Elias immediately, demanding the location of the asset. The file transcript skips 3 days here. 3 blank pages marked redacted, Class 5 temporal anomaly event. The next entry is Elias's own frantic notes, dated April 24, 2025. He was found 300 miles away, near a town in New Mexico, wearing the same clothes. With no memory of the elapsed time. Elias's notes focus on one detail, a surgical scar, perfectly circular and small, behind his right ear. It wasn't there before the encounter. Abduction and return, but the scar suggests something biological was taken or inserted during the missing time. A subtle trace left by the 3I Atlas team during their extraction. The final entry in the file is a shaky, handwritten note scribbled in the margin, next to a printed photo of the Atlas ship Elias had drawn from memory. "I am nothing." If they are this powerful, if they are the culmination of nature, then every altar, every sermon, is a whisper in a hurricane. Forgive my ignorance, Father, for I have seen the true flesh of creation. Narrator outro. Elias Thorne's file abruptly terminates here. He was never located by the Black Site extraction teams. But the key, that obsidian stone, was never found on him. That is the true danger. He is out there, knowing what biological perfection looks like, holding the technology to stop time. They are humanoid, they are vulnerable, but they are infinitely advanced. Sleep well, folks, and remember, the military isn't worried about little gray men. They're worried about humanoids so perfect, they challenge our right to exist. And the Atlas is still monitoring Earth. Current year. 2025, archive closed. Welcome back to the archive. What you are about to hear should not exist. This file, designation Alabaster Protocol 77, was pulled from a deep, encrypted server housed within a forgotten Russian military subnet. If Sergeant Elias K. is still alive, and if this story breaks, he will be instantly taken to a black site. We are reading his final, uncensored field log from July 2025. This is his testimony. File begins. Witness, Sergeant Elias K. Location, Remote Desert Staging Ground, Southwest U.S. Date, July 12, 2025. Log Entry 1, Deployment felt wrong from the start. Not a training op. Not border patrol. We were hunting a seismic signature, something that punched through the crust, miles from anything human. The air felt charged, like static electricity before a massive storm. We were told it was experimental debris. We knew that was a lie. I remember the heat, 115 degrees in the shade, but the men were shaking with cold. My faith, normally a fortress, felt flimsy out there. I kept thinking about the Imam's final lesson, that God's creation encompasses more than we can name, more than we can even conceptualize. I didn't realize how quickly that conceptualization would shatter. We found the impact site on July 14th. It wasn't a crater. It was a fissure. The ground had been peeled back. And in the center, resting on what looked like scorched basalt, was the object. It wasn't metal. It was chitinous, segmented, and looked like a massive, iridescent beetle shell, broken open like a cracked egg. My commanding officer, Captain Rourke, ordered the area quarantined. We saw no debris trail, no fireball, no signature consistent with any conventional aircraft. Just this massive, silent, shattered thing. Then, we smelled it. Not burning fuel. Something biological. Like ozone mixed with iron and fresh pine. Rourke sent in a recon team, 4 men. Only 3 came back, shaken silent. The 4th, Miller, we found later. He hadn't been shot, he was drained. Completely hollowed out, but untouched externally. That's when the high command stopped calling it debris. They started calling it personnel. I was detailed to the containment unit, a temporary prefabricated building erected 20 yards from the wreck. And that's where I saw her. Note how he describes the eyes. This matches the leaked documents from 2014, the Silver Gaze files. She was biological. Undeniably so. Breathing shallowly, bleeding the dark, viscous fluid. She was lying on a military stretcher, covered only by a thin thermal blanket. I thought I was looking at an impossible statue. Her skin was alabaster, translucent almost. Her hair, bright white, lay spread out like silk on the dark cot. She was impossibly tall, even lying down. Her structure was hyperhuman, defined musculature, elegant hands, but the fingers were slightly elongated, tipped with nails that looked like obsidian. She wasn't an angel, she was pure, unsettling biology. Breathtakingly, terrifyingly beautiful. Her eyes opened. Silver. Pure, molten silver, then they shifted, deepening to a liquid gold. They didn't blink. They fixed on me. I dropped my rifle. It wasn't a threat, it was a realization. This wasn't a beast. This was a person. A creation. And she was hurting. We had no translators, no protocols for a conscious, biological entity. They tried chemical restraints, they failed. They tried to measure her metabolism, the equipment overloaded. My job was simple: sit, watch, report movement. I pulled out my prayer beads. I started the tasbih. I needed grounding. That's when it started. The communication. It wasn't sound. It was an insertion of pure data into my consciousness. A presence inside my head, vast and cold, yet strangely focused. I heard my own name, Elias, not spoken, but thought. The feeling was one of overwhelming pressure, like being exposed to the vacuum of space while perfectly intact. Then, the images. She showed me stars. Not dots, but vast, engineered lightscapes, solar systems mapped and connected. And then, a colossal structure, angular and dark, moving through a nebula. She called it, or rather, the data stream labeled it, -3I Atlas. Her thoughts were crystal clear: we are not distant spirits. We are travelers. We are biological, like you, but further along the path. This challenged everything I held sacred. If the cosmos was full of beings who looked like us, what did that mean for the solitary nature of humanity? I whispered a prayer, asking for guidance. She responded instantly, almost amusedly. Your framework is beautiful, Elias. But it is a fence built around a vast garden. There is no one singular creator, only endless cycles of creation. This was the most profound theological challenge I had ever faced, delivered by a wounded woman from beyond the stars. She was deteriorating. Her breathing became shallower. Her organic armor, which looked woven, almost like hard silk, was badly damaged around her torso. I saw fluid leaking from a deep fracture. I knew she wouldn't survive without intervention, but Rourke had explicit orders: observe only. The telepathic contact shifted. It became urgent. They are tracking the residual signature. They seek termination, I understood. They. Another fraction of her own kind, likely antagonistic, sent to clean up the wreckage. I felt panic rising. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. I did the unforgivable. I tore a strip of sterile gauze from the IFAK and pressed it against the worst wound. Her eyes snapped wide, radiating that silver-gold light. A small current of warmth, like benign lightning, flowed from her body into mine. A profound sense of gratitude, then a warning: prepare, Elias. He is biological parity. He will use your fear. The outer perimeter alarms screamed. Not a single shot fired, just a tearing sound, like wet paper. Rourke burst into the tent, eyes wild. Get back, Sergeant. Something just tore through the fence, it's not on two legs. Wait, no, wait, it is on two legs. The second entity stepped into the light. Another humanoid. Male, taller still, maybe 7 feet. Muscle definition that shouldn't exist. Skin was dark, obsidian black, shimmering under the tent lights. He wore armor too, thick, heavily ridged plates that looked like hardened lava. He was terrifying because he was, perfected for violence. He moved silently. Focused entirely on the wounded woman. He didn't carry a gun, but his forearms were segmented, and bone-like blades, razor-sharp, extended from his wrists. This was biological combat. Rourke raised his M4. The dark humanoid barely glanced at him. The woman, Kaylin, that was the name the thought projection gave me, gasped, a sound utterly human. She was trying to rise. The obsidian figure charged. Instinct took over. I shoved Rourke out of the way, grabbed the steel oxygen tank, and slammed it into the dark humanoid's side. The obsidian figure staggered, surprised by the sheer mass of the tank. Not hurt, just momentarily thrown. He looked at me, and his eyes, jet black, completely pupilless, registered me for the first time. Contempt. He was assessing me as an inferior organism. He lifted a segmented arm, aiming the wrist blade at Kaylin's head. Before I could move again, Kaylin reacted. The silver-gold light burst from her, not external light, but emanating from her skin. It was soundless, but devastating. The obsidian humanoid recoiled, screaming, a sound like grinding metal, and the lava-like armor began to fissure and smoke. He didn't die, he dissolved. Or retreated into shadow. He simply wasn't there anymore. Kaylin collapsed, her internal light fading to embers. She reached out, her hand weak, and pressed something into my palm. A gift. A small, smooth shard of deep, resonant emerald, warm to the touch. Memory, Elias. Connection. 10 minutes later, the DIA and Delta forces descended. Helicopters, black vans, no insignia. They didn't even acknowledge Rourke or me. Kaylin was removed on a specialized stretcher, shrouded in metallic foil. The containment unit was dismantled and incinerated. The fissure in the ground was filled with self-setting polymer within the hour. I was debriefed for 72 hours. Everything I said was labeled PTSD-induced delusion. I was shown photos of the site, nothing but scorched desert and military scrap. They told me I helped secure an advanced, downed Russian drone. They gave me a citation for bravery and a mandatory 6 weeks of leave. And they pumped me full of sedatives. But I still have the shard. I hide it in my boot heel. When I hold it, I feel the cold echo of the 3I Atlas, and the vastness of Kaylin's consciousness. I know they look for it. They look for me. They missed the memory, the real gift. She didn't give me technology. She gave me knowledge. I often astrally project now, when the sleep meds wear off. Not on purpose. I just find myself drifting. And sometimes, I see her. Kaylin. She's far away, surrounded by others who look like her. Biological. Humanoid. But she looks back, silver eyes locking with mine across incomprehensible distances. She's healing. And she knows I'm here. The file ends here. The implications, archive listeners, are terrifying. The threat isn't little green men or sentient machinery. The threat is biological parity. They are human, just more dash. More beautiful, more advanced, more ancient. And they are fighting a quiet war right here on Earth in 2025. Sergeant K is not safe. Neither are you. If you hear static, if the air gets cold, delete this file and disappear. Trust no one. The archive is closing. Welcome back to the archive. What I am about to read to you is a transcription of file Chimera 11. This file was successfully wiped from every centralized server by a 3-letter agency on July 14, 2025. I managed to scrape it off a cached military hard drive deep on the second layer of the darknet. If the witness, Sergeant Thorne, were ever identified through this leak, he wouldn't just vanish. He would be repurposed, catalogued, and never seen again. Listen closely. This isn't theoretical, this is a biological encounter. Transcription start, witness file Chimera 11. Date, June 3, 2025. Location, remote Sector 4, Nevada Proving Grounds. It was just a standard high-altitude recon and surveillance sweep. 100 degrees by 10 a.m. We were moving slow, checking for seismic anomalies left over from the last test cycle. My team was 3 clicks ahead. I was running solo, doing deep geological readings. Then the instruments went dead. Not just static, but a pure, clean absence of signal. Everything. The comms, the GPS, even the watch. It was like walking into a dead zone where physics temporarily ceased to matter. I checked the internal shielding. Nothing wrong. I knew immediately this wasn't EMP. This felt intentional. The air grew heavy, like a storm front was pressing down, but the sky was spotless. I followed the source of the pressure. Over the next ridge, I saw it. Not smoke, but steam, rising from a deep impact site. This was a catastrophic entry, but there was no fire, no explosion sound. The sand itself was fused into black glass across a 100-yard radius. The thermal readout was registering temperatures that shouldn't be survivable. The object at the center wasn't metal. It was segmented, dark, matte obsidian, resembling some colossal insect carapace fused with volcanic rock. It was organic. It bled a thick, viscous, silvery fluid that evaporated instantly upon hitting the hot sand. There were no rivets, no seams, no discernible points of entry. It looked grown, not built. I circled it twice, rifle raised, heart hammering. I was trained for enemy insurgents, not geological nightmares. Then I saw the breach. A section of the hull, maybe 8 feet wide, had peeled back, not torn, but retracted like muscle tissue. It was pulsating faintly. I took a breath, checked the safety, and moved into the opening. Protocol was secondary now. Curiosity and terror had taken over. The air inside was sterile, metallic, and cold, a total inversion of the desert heat. The internal lighting was ambient, radiating from the walls themselves. In the center of the small chamber, surrounded by what looked like shattered biofiber consoles, was the pilot. A biological humanoid, clearly female, though that term felt inadequate. She was massive, 6.5 feet tall, and she was grievously wounded. Narrator, note how he describes the eyes. Obsidian black. This matches the 2014 leaked documents from the Argentinian incident. It's not a dark iris, it's a solid, featureless black orb. This is the hallmark of the Watcher's species. Her armor, a dark composite, was torn across the abdomen. Her skin was alabaster white, almost translucent, pulled taut over elegant bone structure. Her hair was sparse, like shimmering silver filaments against her skull. But those eyes, staring right through me, were pure, liquid shadow. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. There was no blood pooling, but a clear, viscous substance was seeping from the wound. It was a biological system failure, not a simple rupture. Despite the immediate threat assessment screaming in my head, I saw only catastrophic injury. She was dying, right there, under the relentless sun of the American Southwest. Forget protocol. Forget training. She was a living entity in pain. I lowered my rifle, slowly. I reached into my medkit, pulling out the combat gauze and the sealant gel. I moved forward, whispering standard military reassurance, "I'm a medic. I'm going to help you." She didn't react physically, but I felt a distinct spike of curiosity, a cold, probing thought, enter my mind. I worked fast, patching the immediate breach, knowing deep down my human technology was likely useless. Maybe even harmful. But I had to try. When I finished, I stepped back, exhausted, waiting for her to lash out or vanish. She lifted a hand, long, delicate fingers tipped with polished, black nails, and pointed toward her neck, where subtle gill-like structures pulsed faintly. She wasn't communicating verbally. She was transmitting. She closed her eyes. I felt a pressure behind my forehead, not painful, but overwhelming, like every radio station in the world decided to play at once, inside my skull. She wasn't just stabilizing her own body, she was reaching into mine. I dropped to my knees, unable to move. And then, silence. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of knowledge. Not just data, but concepts. Geometry, astrophysics, history spanning millions of years, and a deep, visceral understanding of what 3I Atlas meant, a designation for a colossal object far out in the Kuiper belt. I knew, without being told, that I had just received a fraction of her reality. When I looked back at the biological humanoid, the wound was gone. Not healed, but erased. The composite armor had resealed itself. She rose, smoothly, effortlessly, towering over me. The pallor was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant vitality. My human medkit had done nothing, her biological pulse had simply initiated an immediate, complex regeneration sequence. She took 2 silent steps toward me. Her movement was utterly alien, no wasted motion. She extended her hand. In her palm lay a small, black, polished shard. It wasn't metallic or ceramic, it felt warm, almost liquid, vibrating slightly. I hesitated. She pushed the shard gently into my open hand. I knew this was the payment, the gift, the anchor. She gave one final, powerful mental impression: silence. You served life. Then she turned. The breach in the hull sealed instantly, the organic material flowing back into place. The entire craft began to sink, not into the ground, but through it. The obsidian form liquefied and merged with the desert floor in seconds, leaving only the fused glass crater behind. The electromagnetic silence vanished. My radio crackled back to life, yelling static. I scrambled out of the crater, reporting a controlled burn anomaly and equipment failure. I lied smoothly, automatically. Within the hour, 3 Black Hawk helicopters were overhead, carrying men in different uniforms than mine. They sterilized the crater, collecting fused sand samples. They found nothing unusual. But I had the shard hidden inside the lining of my tactical vest. I knew they were looking for a craft, not a biological encounter. Weeks passed. I was back on base in Texas by late July 2025. The investigation was dismissed as a localized seismic event. I kept the shard locked in a secure box under my bunk. It hummed slightly, constantly radiating that same cold, metallic air. I didn't dare show it to anyone. It looked like a piece of polished volcanic rock, utterly harmless. But every night, I could feel the knowledge, the understanding of 3I Atlas, sitting dormant in my subconscious. On August 1, 2025, I finally touched it directly, without gloves, before sleeping. The temperature was 0. I felt an immediate draw, a mental suction. I tried to pull away, but my muscles failed. I wasn't just tired, I was frozen. My perception began to separate from my body. I realized what the biological humanoid had given me, a key to conscious transference. Narrator, this confirms the Shaman Protocol files, conscious transference achieved through bioengineered technology. They don't need teleportation, they simply move consciousness. This is terrifying because it's untraceable. I looked down and saw my own body, lifeless and pale, lying in the cot. I was pure awareness, detached from all physical limitation. I was rising, rapidly, silently, through the ceiling. The ascent was immediate. Earth became a mottled blue and white marble in moments. There was no sensation of speed, only distance. I bypassed the atmosphere, the orbital debris, and the high-altitude satellites. I was traveling to the only place my new awareness desired, the colossal ship I knew only as 3I Atlas, parked in deep space. I arrived. 3I Atlas was beyond anything human engineering could conceive. It was miles long, silent, segmented, and utterly biological, a colossal leviathan of dark, structured mass, resting just beyond the moon's orbital plane. It wasn't powered by rockets, it pulsed with its own internal, systemic light. It was the definition of deep space surveillance. I phased through the hull without resistance. The interior was a vast cathedral of ambient light and bioarchitecture. There were no sharp corners, only seamless curves. Other humanoids moved through the vast spaces, hundreds of them, all tall, pale, and silent, conducting maintenance on the ship's systems, which looked less like wires and more like vascular structures. And there she was. The biological humanoid from the desert, completely restored. She stood at the center of a massive operational array, monitoring Earth. Her armor was gone, she wore a simple, flowing black garment. She looked like a goddess carved from light, her beauty terrifying in its perfection. I called her name mentally, Kaylin, though I don't know why. It just fit. She turned, acknowledging my presence instantly. The communication was flawless, pure data transmission. You repaired life, Thorn. You proved that your species holds the capacity for empathy beyond survival protocol. She explained that their species, the Syndicate, monitored civilizations nearing technological adolescence. Their mission was observational, unless catastrophic self-termination became imminent. She didn't speak of God or salvation, she spoke of entropy and statistics. She projected a vision into my mind: cities choked by self-inflicted climate death, global resource wars, and the final, blinding flash of nuclear collapse in the year 2041. Your potential for violence outweighs your capacity for growth. We are waiting for the inflection point. It wasn't a warning, it was a probability forecast, delivered with cold, clinical certainty. In that vast, cold place, looking into her impossible eyes, I realized this wasn't an angel or a demon. This was a biological humanoid life form, far older, far more complex, facing the same universal dilemmas. I felt a terrifying, deep kinship with her, a recognition of shared sentient biology separated only by millions of years of technological divergence. I was simply a primitive relative who hadn't learned to stop fighting yet. The conversation ended without warning. Kaylin simply turned back to her array. I felt a violent, wrenching snap, like a massive rubber band breaking. The light, the cold, the massive ship, all vanished. I was slammed back into my body in the Texas barracks. I gasped, choking on the sterile barracks air. The black shard, still clutched in my hand, was cold again, inert. I was back. It was 3:17 a.m., August 2, 2025. I've had 5 subsequent projections since then. Each time, I see the Syndicate humanoids. I see the 3i Atlas, watching. I can't control the timing, the shard dictates the travel. I am now a scout, an unwitting informant, a ghost in the vast machine of alien surveillance. I am living proof that our military assets encountered, aided, and were compromised by a biological humanoid entity. The file ends here. Thorne stopped recording on August 20, 2025. Transcription end. Narrator, that is File Chimera 11. A sergeant helps a stranded biological humanoid, and in return, he gets a front-row seat to the final decades of human civilization, broadcast from a starship light years away. He is a walking, breathing broadcast tower for the Syndicate. This file was not deleted because it was false, it was deleted because it detailed the true nature of the biological threat. They don't conquer us with warships. They simply watch us collapse, and they use humans to bridge the vast, silent gap between us and the 3i Atlas. If you ever find a piece of black, impossibly polished rock, do not touch it. And for God's sake, do not look up.